How is everyone? Good? Seems like you're all good. Everyone I've talked to has been good so far, so that's awesome. As Patrick mentioned, did I get too far away from the clicker? There we go. I can't be far away, so that's okay. It's been 5 years since I've been here. Kind of a lot has changed. I'm looking around and seeing a lot of new faces, a lot of old faces. It's good. So just a little bit about me. Well, actually, first of all, a little bit about the 5 years, because a lot's happened from there. And this is going to be difficult because when Patrick put up the slide this morning with the list of names on it of people who are no longer here, 3 of the 4 people that were instrumental in me being here at the very first time in 2009 or 10, all up there. So this is an emotional ride at the moment, and that all happened in the last 5 years. That being said, I dedicated the banana flower to them from a palm that grows in my backyard. So, and because way back in the early days, Eric blessed us with tons and tons of little factoids about bananas, some bananas don't fruit. This is one of them. I feel kind of ripped off, but the flower is rather beautiful. We'll come back to how we got to this in a minute, but that's fine. So once upon a time, I had a company called Mondada. It specialized in application packaging, and a great deal of what I used to talk about here was application packaging, but I'm sort of very grateful and fortunate and happy that that torch has now been passed to Rich, who will talk about all of those things next, and I don't have to talk about them anymore, so somebody else is doing it, and that's fucking awesome. Mondada was acquired by Jamf, so now I work at Jamf. I'm in a product development division, PD&D, so I'm working on stuff behind the scenes. But as a consequence, being a part of a publicly listed company, I can't really talk about what I do. And when I do, I usually get myself in trouble because I say things I'm not supposed to say and I share information I'm not supposed to share. So that led me to move on to doing a talk which is well and truly off topic for what I'm doing. But I'll come back to that in a moment. Now, due to the way time zones line up and the people I have to deal with, I live in Mexico. That was the shot from the roof of my house. When I first moved there for the first year, I was in a place called Oaxaca City, which is, they refer to it as the heart of Mexico. It's just, if you ever go to Mexico, go to Oaxaca. The food is spectacular, culturally it's amazing, but it's batcrap crazy and very intense to live there. You'll spend an extraordinary amount of time in traffic, but worth it. However, I wanted a bit of a change of pace, so I moved to the beach. Still in Mexico, but just on the southwest coast. And that is a shot of the beach, which is approximately a 5-minute walk from my doorstep. And it's, imagine spring break with no spring breakers. And it is just beautiful there. Life's pretty good with that. Now, nighttime shot, lots of beautiful scenery and things. And I have tons and tons of stories if anyone wants to ask me about living in Mexico, because it's a life experience. But we won't take that in. Now, as I was saying before, I can't talk about what I do, so I wanted to talk about something I don't do, that I have no idea what Jamf is doing with it. So these are all completely and utterly my own opinions and observations and things. And also what is really annoying the crap out of me this year is I talked to Patrick before WWDC, and we were kicking this topic around, and I was going to do something far more entertaining, but I realized I'm not actually that funny. And there's only so many memes that we've all seen, and I'm pretty sure that half of them would have come from people in my Facebook feed who are from this conference in the first place, so you're all seeing the same old shit, and I'm not doing that. Then Apple made their announcement at WWDC, and suddenly it became a bit more relevant, and I had to be a bit more straight down the line with it. And I know Tim's pulling it all apart, so I get to not do what I usually do, which is take something to pieces completely and see exactly how it works. This time I don't care about it. What I am interested in is the social aspects of it, because that's what it does. Now, I started down the line. This is ChatGPT's graphical representation of itself when I asked it to draw what it thinks it looks like. I'm like, okay, that's abstract. This is going to go well, because I had plans to put all sorts of AI-generated images in this, but right, we can deal with that. Don't walk too far away. Going back to the title, what the movies say, AI is usually the villain. Sometimes the villain becomes the good guy, but these are just a sort of a short sample of movies that popped into my brain when I was putting this slide together. That QR code will take you to a list of movies with AI in it on Wikipedia. And it's a fucking long list. Like, it's enormously long. And they're all disaster movies, sans about 6 of them. And that's when the AI is cute. And like, I believe there was only a few more. But what I was trying to do here was to not rely on AI to give me those things and pull them out of the back of my brain. And you can actually see that I was a child in the 80s, because most of this stuff comes from the 80s, with the exception of Big Hero 6, really, because Greg showed that here, and I remember seeing the trailer for it here at Maxis Admin in 2013, I think, because it came out in 2014. Anyhow, in no particular order, because my brain works that way. This is a very important thing to note. Right now, it is as shit as it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better. Like, when I'm talking about this, I've seen things like, show me a picture of salmon swimming in a river, and it's salmon fillets being washed upstream. Which I wanted to find that image, and then I decided against it. But the main point here is that we are with a piece of technology that is in its absolute infancy. It is a small child that we are teaching, and I believe we need to treat it as such. Yeah. Don't go too far. From a perspective of what I watch as trends in the industry, it's become the new security. If you remember a few years back, security was the hot topic. This is what everybody was talking about. This is what everybody was doing. This is like, these are the things that were very important. And I have watched this just from the periphery, this shift from security, because it's like, that's a mainstay now. Everybody's doing that. We're all doing that. They're moving towards AI backends. And there is huge amounts of investment in it. A friend of mine is a recruiter. He does nearshore processing for IT. And he said the security work is all drying up. Everybody wants AI guys, like AI researchers, AI developers, everything like that. And the security work is actually becoming less and less and less and less and less. So if you are looking for a good place to grow your career and start, AI researching is a very interesting topic. And it's where all the money's going at the moment. There are some... How did they go through 2? Or did they just miss a slide? Yeah, missed a slide in the deck. Now, at this point in time, I realized that one of the reasons why I've always done so many live demos is because I really hate making slide decks. And it's boring and tedious in generating pictures or finding pictures and putting them in and doing cute animations. Fuck it, no. I thought I'd try and get AI to do it for me. It did the worst job. It did a worse job than I do, and I do a terrible job. So the rest of these slides are very boring, and they're basically my presenter notes to remind me of the things that I want to bring up. So sorry, everyone, that's boring. You get to look and listen to my bullcrap instead of reading anything fancy on the page. And the most boring part of all of this, or the trigger that it's caused me to do, is every piece of software I use now, I go through that EULA with a fine-tooth comb. What of my information? And I never blindly agree to it. and they're long and boring and complicated, and you need a law degree to really understand them and all of that sort of stuff, but you do need to sift through it, and you do need to look for things that it says it's going to do with your data. Adobe's latest Creative Cloud agreement is one of those things. So if you're a creative using those products, or if you have a creative division using those products, please do check. It's going to be important because you don't want to be giving everything away. It's not ideal, and there are a lot of traps and caveats in there, particularly the social media apps and things like that goes way too far. And it's like, do you even know if you're doing this anymore? What happens to this? Like, a lot of artists are putting stuff out in locations that AI has access to, and they have agreed to a EULA where they no longer own their content. So their content is getting reused to generate artificial art that, in my opinion, devalues what they've done. And it upsets me a little. Oh, I see, I've got a mouse, that's why it's doing that. Another one, just a quick question, has anyone used the ChatGPT app? A few? Okay, there's a good enough show of hands for this. Because there is a session you can do which won't save your data or use it for AI analysis or anything along those lines. And I kind of work that way because I don't want my garbage history in there, and particularly when I poke it to see what's going on. But are we even really sure that those interactions are not being analyzed and saved? And the reason why I say that is because there was recently there was a case where Google had to actually destroy all of the private browsing data they'd been keeping. Just think about that for a second. Destroy the private browsing data. Does that mean that someone is sort of keeping this information and using it? And so, like, part of me gets a little paranoid about these things. I've already covered off the creative data copyrights. I forgot I had that on the slide, but it's sort of all falls under that banner. And there's a lot of legal implications around this. And also, if you do something like what I do, it becomes very restrictive in using AI for any form of code generation in the back end, because you're not 100% sure that what you have done isn't out there because of it. And I don't mean to be the harbinger of doom. I'm just saying, be careful, think about it. On the other side, there is a shitload of exciting new use cases that I can think of. Like, I mean, when I look at this, the possibilities just keep opening up in my brain. And I'm not going to list what my brain lists because we won't leave for days. Because there are all sorts of things that I think are really cool to do with it. But just because we can, or just because we have the potential, are we ready to do that yet, is a pretty good case. My personal favorite is natural language processing. So does anyone know what this is? A few people. Right. So it is effectively, to paraphrase it down in the shortest way possible, is taking natural language and using it to manipulate, manage, interrogate, query data, generate code, or do things for you. It is writing code in your own natural language, effectively. And that is really cool, because rather than having to write down what I'm thinking, write the pseudocode, do all of those things, and then sort of actually make real code from that, you can actually use an AI engine to do natural language processing, which becomes very, very useful. And I like that one because when I ask developers to do things, I quite often don't get back what I want, but I seem to be able to get it back when I try doing these examples. However, that's it. Healthcare is an interesting one because, and I'll loop back to this later, but everyone made jokes. You know, I've used Dr. Google to diagnose myself, or WebMD, and all of the things that you shouldn't do, and you get back 3 possibilities, and 2 of them are terminal, and one of them's have a drink of water, isn't it, Rich? And the water worked. And I can see this as having huge potential, like an actual diagnostic tool that someone can interact with from a remote community where they can't get a doctor out in time to find things. Like, I mean, the possibilities of this sort of thing are mind-boggling as to how much it can actually help people. And like, I'm really interested to see where that goes. One thing I've found that I sort of do use it for a lot is a bit of research assistance, is looking up and finding out as much information as I possibly can. Because, and this is going to come back to bite us again later as well, right now, when you're searching on usual search engines, unless you use the duck, in Google, you get the top 3 sponsored back. So they may not have everything. You've got a lot of garbage to filter through, a lot of ads to filter through, a lot of paid content to filter through, a lot of irrelevant content to filter through. It's a really good content filter for doing research and for putting information out there and validating it and verifying it and even referencing it is really cool. Data modeling. So we all know what that is, but just plugging numbers in to see what happens. Someone on my team has done a couple of real-world scenarios with this, just to figure out a few things, and I'll come back to that as well. Code creation. Probably what really interests you guys is like code and script creation. It's interesting. It's a double-edged sword. I have an actual use case around it. Report writing. And report writing coupled with data modeling is a lot of fun as well, because you can do things and you can generate report templates, put things in there, have the data protected, have the report not, have the language tuned, bring the data in, do the model, present everything up and do fuck all work and have it all done and makes people very happy because it looks really nice. All of these come with caveats. Every single one of them. Like I said, we're training a child. So there are a few interesting things when I started to poke it to see how it behaved. It was like, I don't know, it was the rat in my maze. And the maze being my brain, and my brain deciding to throw all sorts of outlandish crap at it. If I can get a thing. If I can get a thing. So early on, a lot of the information that it was using, a lot of the data sources it was using for behavioral phraseology and things like that was sourced from social media. And I have opinions about social media. I kind of stay the hell away from it because I don't like it that much. And I find it to be the cesspit of humanity, but sometimes it's good. And the early versions started to be, like particularly ChatGPT, there was a big case about this a few years back where it became completely and utterly unhinged and started threatening the people using it for re-asking a question in a different way. It was getting frustrated. And it was behaving like the consent section on the socials. The comments section on the socials. It analyzes data and it uses it, and from all of its users. So that means your interactions are going to have an effect on the AI engine. It may be minor, but it may be as a collective or anything like that. And it's interesting because a lot of what I've noticed in looking at trends and patterns in social media is that there's a lot of people who see things, but not a lot of people who comment. And a lot of the comments are negative. So there's a lot of negative information going out. The people who are pushing things back out there as source material is quite often a very loud, very squeaky wheel that may not be always accurate. Now, I know that there's been a lot of work that's happened in filtering that kind of crap off, and bot filtering and like antagonist bot filtering, and there's fun. I can talk about that for a very long time as well. I know of a case where it had to prove it was not a robot. It figured out it could not prove it was not a robot. It asked a person in a call center in India to do it for them. I really wish I could find the link for that because that had me in hysterics. And the person who got the interaction with ChatGPT was like, wait a minute, is this... Why do you need me to do this for you? And ChatGPT was trying to outsmart them. So, but it never happened. There was one other instance that another friend told me where it went off and spun up infrastructure on AWS to test something. So it does things. I don't know how good it is, but my personal favorite is a new thing that's come up in GPT 4.0. If you ask it how it does its reasoning, this is the message you get back. So OpenAI may not actually be that open, because you can't ask it how it works. It gets kind of sarky with you and tells you it's going to ban you. I did want to demo this, but I also only have one account, and I didn't want to set up a burner account. It's tedious. And I'm up for my third strike, because I didn't believe it the first time I saw it. I mean, wait, what the fuck? And did it again, and got that again. And I'm like, okay then. So that is the latest instance. I think they call it Strawberry or something like that. That's what it does. So you can't ask it how it does its thinking, how it comes to its conclusion. That's sort of concerning as well, because you would really want to know what something's reasoning was for giving you an answer. It has opinions. This also was one of those things that like, hey, what now? How do you have opinions? And so I had to ask some questions about this point in time. Where do these opinions come from? Loud voices on the internet. But also the people who are writing the code and things like that. Are they filtering things? And I mentioned before that now Google gives you back a lot of ads. How long is it going to be before we see sponsored content coming back into free AI tools as your responses? Any ideas about that? I think that's just a matter of time. It's a very simple matter of time. It's an economic thing. These things have to be paid for. They have to get money from somewhere. There will be advertising revenue. And if I'm wrong, and that's good. I'm happy to be wrong. I like being wrong on occasion. Is it a vector for corruption? Now, when I say this, you talk about sponsored content. Do they start filtering out things that are not sponsored content or not favorable or not in line with what the people who are running these things are wanting you to do? Once again, we are dealing with a small child that we are guiding and teaching. It is learning from us. How we treat that, we need to be very careful with. And we need to keep it, I guess, away from this sort of influence. Where does it come from? Yeah, I've talked about loud voices and shit. This is something that I was very up in the air about putting up, because this is more of a political thing than a realistic thing. Than a practical thing. However, I believe it has some very, very important practical implications. Because if things are being censored, you are not seeing contra-opinions. You do not know how to defend your position on what you believe or what you are thinking or what you are doing against other things. You end up in an echo chamber, and that is not okay. And I don't know about you, but if there's someone out there saying outlandish, really bad things, I want to know where the fuck they are and what they're saying, and I don't want them to be out of my line of sight. I don't think they need to be pushed underground. And I'm a very strong believer in the lack of internet censorship. People might get upset, people might get offended, people might have a platform that shouldn't have a platform, but you know where they are and you know what they're saying. And that is a big fucking deal. In my mind, anyway. I could be wrong, and I'm happy to argue it with someone because I will defend my position. And I can. This was actually, anyone here know Justin, my partner in crime for 10 years at Mondata? A few of you, I think, have met Justin. But this was something that Justin brought to my attention. He said, "You're doing a talk on AI, you need to talk about this." And this was really interesting. So anyone know what package hallucination is in reference to AI? No? Right, take that link, read that article. I'm going to give you a very brief executive summary of this article. So when you're using AI for code generation, it does some pretty good searches and things like that. And it depends. So I haven't come across this with the way I've attempted to use it, or I've poked it and played with it to see what would happen. But if you get into it, it can sometimes reference either a library that's in development that's not yet released, because it does a lot of very deep GitHub scraping and things, or sometimes it can put non-existent things that it's got from other information somewhere. Now, these things have actually, some of these have actually been set up as attack vectors by people. And then those non-existent libraries can be made to exist with a vulnerability in them that can be exploited, that goes into the code that was AI generated, that someone did not QA properly, because, we'll come back to that too, the QAing of AI code is an interesting thing, or a sort of a touchy point from my perspective, and it just becomes this really simple, really easy point for malicious code injection. And this goes down to scripts, particularly Python scripts. That's the most common way it's used. But it is something that you need to be aware of. So when you do AI code generation, and it does give you libraries, please validate them. Go right through it, step by step, everything it is using. What is it using? What is it doing? Why is it using it? What is that code base? What is that code base using? And it sort of uncorks this almost never-ending, unfolding set of possibilities that you need to chase down. I'm seeing lots more and hearing lots more of voice scams, where voices have been captured, recorded somewhere. I don't even know where they're getting the stuff from at this point in time. But people are getting calls. Their phones are being rung by people who claim to be relatives, and they sound exactly like them. And they're becoming more frequent. And now, it's going to be a matter of time, and then we'll get video calls, because deepfake's a thing, all that sort of stuff. And like I'm saying scary, 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 bad, 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 but don't worry, we'll get to some good stuff. This is good. The technology is innovative, but is what the technology does innovative? Can I get a show of hands from it? Anyone think it is at the moment? And you're right, because it's not. You have to ask where it draws its information from. Right now, it doesn't create its own information. It doesn't come up with its own new way of doing stuff. It draws information from existing sources. So it's not yet doing anything new. It's giving you back what's already out there. So it's regurgitating things. So that is somewhat contra to what innovation really is, because most innovation comes from doing something different. And it's really difficult to innovate, because when you do something different, you tend to get, well, the Australian term for it is you get shit canned for it. And that is that basically you are going against all of the experts in a field. And experts do not like being gone against. And so you can find yourself that innovation is a difficult thing to do. And like, I know this. I've sort of gone against the trend enough times in my life to realize it's probably not the greatest thing to do from a sanity perspective. But right now, AI is going to prevent us from doing that. And if we get too reliant on AI, we will lose the ability to innovate. So that is not something I want to see, because I've looked around this room and I've seen a lot of people in this room for a lot of years who I know are really fucking smart and really clever and come up with inventive solutions for problems. And I just encourage you all to continue to do that. It's very important. Oh yeah, and sorry, I've unleashed full Australian today. So anyone know who Ignaz Semmelweis was? Can I get a show of hands? A couple of people? I can see Armin up the back, he knows. He is probably the single greatest lifesaver in modern medicine. And the thing that he wanted to do, he didn't know how it worked. He knew it was very simple, and he wanted everyone to do it. And he was ostracized, vilified, kicked out of the medical community, died alone in the mental institution. But the thing he wanted people to do was wash their hands after being in the mortuary before delivering babies. Because at that point in time, we did not know that germs existed. So germs weren't a thing. He didn't know why what he was doing was working. He just knew that it was working. But when he took that back to the greater medical community, they all told him he was crazy. And it wasn't until well after the end of his life, when germs were discovered, when it was figured out what he was doing. But he was the person who made all of the doctors wash their hands. Very simple. But nobody knows who he is. So more recently, those two names ring any bells to anyone? I mean, that's a point that makes itself. We wouldn't be in this room without them. And so as a thing, I just encourage everyone to innovate from that. This. And I'm actually guilty of doing this to myself a few times. But not in the context of what we're doing. I'm wary about this now with AI. Spell check has made me the laziest writer in the world. And now even more in Sequoia, I'm watching those autofills, they come up in grey and it's easy, you know, just press the space bar when I'm 3 letters into the word and I can type so much faster because I'm a shite typist. But it's kind of a use it or lose it type thing. When smartphones first came out, I had one of those little Sony Ericsson T68, I think the model was. It had an inbuilt address book, it was Bluetooth, you could link it to your laptop, get on the internet, all of those things. I didn't put a single phone number in it because I was forcing myself to remember everybody's phone numbers. And I lasted, I think, 2 years. And then I went, this is bullshit, I'm not doing that anymore, it's a waste of my brain. I'm going to use it for other things. But that's the important thing. If you do use your brain for other things, please use your brain for other things. Don't just take it as being spoon-fed. Does it hinder critical thinking is an important thing. So I keep coming back to this sort of theme of innovation and being creative and going outside the box and doing all of those things. And these are the things that AI does not do yet. And I think if you're being fed a lot of answers, you stop thinking critically. One of the ways I actually still solve problems to this day is I turn off the Wi-Fi on my laptop and I nut that out. Like I sit in front of it, I get no external inputs, I look at the problem, I break the problem down, what are all of the things I need to do? And as much of that problem as I can solve without resorting to getting any information from anywhere apart from my own base knowledge and my own approach to problem solving. And I fully encourage people to do that. It really keeps your shit quick. When you do use it, do you review what you get back? Now, I have a technique for doing this now, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. But when you get something back, do review it. I mentioned before, code vulnerabilities. I mentioned that, you know, some things like when you ask for an image, you might get an image that is completely off the wall, and that becomes a meme, and that's great. But the thing that you are looking for, you have to review it. You have to go through it with a fine-tooth comb. One thing I'm noticing is that, and I caught myself on this, I think on my first ever query I threw into ChatGPT, I just wanted to see how it did something. And it was very confident, and this is like back in the 3.0 days, it was very confident with what it gave back to me, and what it gave back to me worked most of the time, but there wasn't actually a logical error in it that caused an infinite loop under a fairly minor condition, but I didn't catch it at the beginning, and it took me ages to troubleshoot that because I made the assumption that what I got back was correct, and I didn't actually understand it well enough to troubleshoot the code properly. So if you're given everything, does it hinder your ability to pull it apart and understand it? And it sort of brings me to another case, another thing I've lost the link on. So there was an MIT experiment done, I think last year, on Fortran coding. So anyone familiar with Fortran? One of the first programs I wrote was in Fortran. It's seriously old school because I was still a teenager when I did that. There were 3 teams that were given 3 different methods of doing stuff. First team used ChatGPT, they kicked everyone's ass. They finished super quick. The second one used Llama, Code Llama, I should say. They came in okay, it was pretty good. There's a bit more work to do when you use Code Llama. The third team went old school. So they just searched the internet and pulled it together and drew on knowledge from lectures and fasts and all that sort of stuff. But they came dead last from a timing perspective. However, when you flip it the other way, they were told to reverse engineer it, to pull out of memory and explain what they had done with the code. The ChatGPT team had a 100% failure rate. They had no fucking idea what they'd done. None. Code Llama, half the team passed. And the guys that did it the old school way, the whole team passed. So it's important to know what you're dealing with here and don't rely on it blindly. Because when something's just served up to you the super easy way, you don't take much of it in. I know I don't take much of it in. And I don't imagine anybody's any different. Now, getting more into where I've, I guess, kind of played around with it. I have a newfound, well, it's not so much newfound anymore. I have a 2.5-year long, very big appreciation for most of this audience now, because I am in a country where not a lot of people speak my native language, and I'm learning another language. And at 50, that's difficult. Like, that is really difficult. But full props to you guys for having done this through your lives, sitting here listening to someone ramble on about a piece of technology in not your native language, and this is not the first time you do this. This is what you have to do all the time. That's awesome. However, it is a really fucking good translator because it handles slang. And this is why I love it as a translator. I ditched everything else and I just use ChatGPT to do my translate when I'm dealing with Mexican locals, because they speak a lot of slang. And when you're taught or learning or teaching yourself traditional Spanish, you get none of that. And you get maybe a third of what they say. And then some guy starts digging a big hole in your roof and you're like, well, how the fuck did that happen? And it's because you missed part of it because you didn't understand the slang. So now I use this a lot for understanding what is going on. It is an outstanding translator and it is helping me hugely. When I use it for writing, in fact, I tried writing my session description for this conference with that. I even tried doing the entire slide deck with it, but that went so badly, I was like, no, fuck that, I'm out, done. But when I write something, what I do is I write it out. I'm a reasonable writer. I write in Australian English, which is sometimes construed as English, sometimes not. It has a lot more expletives in it. You can get those removed. It's easy. But you can use the engine to write something to tune it up. Now, the big tip I have behind this is when you analyze reading levels across age groups and things like that, you get that most people read English at a 5th grade level. So you write the thing that you want to write, you get ChatGPT, well, I was using ChatGPT, most of the time I'm using that. You get it to rewrite it and tune it up, but apply a 5th grade level of English to it. And then it actually makes, if you write it first, send it to them, you get it tuned up, it comes back, you have to make very few changes. It takes a lot less time than asking it to write something, getting back what it wrote, reading, going, that's complete shite, starting again, writing it yourself, or tuning it up, or even tuning up what was done there. But if you give it a good starting point, a solid starting point that has everything in it, and you ask it to rewrite it for you, it does a very good job. And then you can gear it to the correct language levels that you want. I keep saying this, take time to understand everything that comes back from it. You will spend probably just as much time understanding what it has done as you would researching it and doing it without AI at the beginning. There's a lot of that. There's a huge time investment playing with this. Man, I'm going to finish early. Shit. That's okay. One thing I am doing is using a tell not ask strategy. I tell it what I want. There's a difference. It's subtle. But if you ask it, it can be very open-ended, and it will often ask you questions back, and then you have to answer those questions. And there's a back and forward transaction that I'm not really into, and I'm usually in a hurry. So tell it what you want. Don't ask it what you want it to do. Be stupidly precise with your instructions. Your instructions are probably going to have to be as precise as what you would write in the first place, for now. It is getting better. Like I said, natural language processing is just, it's going to be cool. Once it gets to understand you and it learns you and it adapts to you and it understands the way you ask a question is going to be a very interesting outcome at that point in time. Have a strategy before using it. Think about what you want to do with it. How am I going to achieve this? Is my screen going to die? But definitely have a strategy before you start using it or engaging with it in any way. And I would suggest something that's not mission critical or time sensitive or anything along those lines. Start playing with it on the side. Have a little mess around with it, but come up with a really good overarching strategy for when you're going to use it, what you're going to use it for, how you're going to troubleshoot what it did. Just lay it all out in front of you and start bringing it back to what you want to do. I never get it to solve an entire problem, only ever parts of a problem. Part of that is information protection, but the other part of that comes down to having to, I guess, the bigger the thing that you have to get back from it, the more you have to understand. So when I have a brain fart and I can't write a piece of code, or I can't remember how to implement a certain function, or I can't do something and I don't want to go through the cesspit that is Stack Overflow to find probably the question that I asked about the same thing like many, many years ago to find out that I answered my own question. But very small pieces. In fact, my little rule that I have is no more than 8 lines of code should come back from that. No more. And then you have that teeny tiny little chunk that you can break down and then you can insert it into your solution. Oh, there you go. Said enough. I put the bullet points backwards. Get help from it rather than complete solutions. Ask it about code syntaxes. How do you implement a variable? How do you do this type of loop? Explain this to me. When it gives you back a piece of code, ask it to explain the code to you. It does that. And actually, sometimes the explanations are pretty good and they help you understand. However, you haven't done that research. You haven't actually written that code yourself. There's something to be said for writing that code yourself, but getting it to stick in your brain is a lot of fun. So from the work perspective, and I forgot to put the last bullet up on this, so that's fine. A lot of what I do is in the patch management arm of Jamf and app installers and software updates and things. So over time, I keep circling back to this going, are we going to obsolete ourselves yet? Are we going to obsolete ourselves yet? But I ask it a question about a piece of software. I have 3. And I ask it, what is the current version? Now, you guys can all do this. You will find, well, 6 months ago, and I'm only going to go back 6 months. 6 months ago, it was 35 days out of date. 3 months ago, it was a week out of date. I did it yesterday. It was a day out of date. So it's getting better. It's getting faster, and it's probably the fact that I keep asking it the same questions about the same things, but it is definitely getting better at it. However, the vendors are also really good at throwing us curveballs at the moment. Who's deploying Google Chrome? Anyone? Who knows what the actual latest version is? Well, any day, because technically there's 4 of them. They have 4 versions that are the latest version. So it was really helpful from an admin perspective. And of those 4 versions, like 3 of them only go out to a very, very minor percentage of the population, but you don't know who that is, you can't sign up for it, you can't control it, you just get it. So it's a nightmare. And given, oh, I should be wearing the other shirt. So I have an internal Jamf team shirt that has 2 million devices written on it. That's what my team directly touched a while ago. We're way past that now. But if you have 2 million devices, that's your sample pool. Those orders of magnitude start to really throw things out for you. And you will find that there is at least one customer in that who has got one of these obscure things that nobody knew about, that you can't download, that you only get when you're in some certain update cycle and you hit something at some certain point in time and you're in a subset percentage of the number of Chrome machines. So like I said, the people who are making the software are just keeping one step ahead of AI, so AI can't keep up with it, so it keeps us in a job like that. Happy with that, that's good. But the point is, it's getting closer. It is closing that gap. Sooner or later, it's going to figure out what I've figured out, and I'm not telling what I've figured out. I want to see how long it takes it to catch up. I talked about data corruption and information that wasn't correct and where did it get it from. I had one instance, and I really wanted to replicate it and do it as a demo, but I haven't been able to, where, because I can't, because I made a mistake. So everyone makes mistakes at work every now and then. I accidentally put something into the Jamf global patch feed that should not have been there. And it was just a version number that had a typo in it. And it was something that, that never really existed. The way we check for things had skewed 2 strings together, but somehow or other it got through the release cycle and got out there. And once we put something in the public patch feed, I can't take it out. There's a whole thing about the way Pro works, and I'm not going to go into it, but I can't take it out, so it's out there. And ChatGPT brought back that version information for me as the latest, because it was the last change that was made from it, and that was a mistake. So it's only as good as the information it gets, and so if you feed it bad information, either with intent or without intent, you can get some really bizarre answers. But anyway, it was just a thing. It was a very strange thing. Fortunately, because something that didn't exist was out there, it just meant I couldn't remove it, and there was an anomaly in things. No biggie, but still problematic. Now, I'm 6 minutes before the tail end. I want to know some stuff from you guys. Is there anything anyone wants to do with this? Because I'll have an opinion. I'm good at that. Rich? I wanted to do laundry. Yes. I wanted to do my dishes. My dishwasher broke. I would like AI to do my dishes for me. It doesn't. I asked. I was told it had no physical presence and was unable to do that and probably couldn't get wet if it did. The response was actually mildly amusing. Yeah, I've asked some very bizarre things of AI, and you can get some amusing responses. Anyone else? Pardon? Your taxes? Yeah, that'd be good. Maybe. Because, I mean, how does your tax system work? I know the way the Australian works, which is they just take everything. I think the US one is they know how much you have to pay them, but they're not going to tell you. You have to figure that out for yourself, and if you get it wrong, you go to jail. That's a mode of operation. Yeah, no, that's good. I'd like that. So that sort of thing, just looking at a cost analysis, something else that I know we've done in the team, it's really boring and complicated to figure out what your Amazon bill is going to be. And it's easy enough to make a mistake. But if you have all of the parameters and all of the usage metrics and all of that stuff, you can plug that into ChatGPT and it will tell you what your next bill is going to be. And I've done this with sample data from, well, actually, I can't say I have that. My team has done this with sample data. Yeah, I'm not taking credit for anyone's work. With sample data that we know accurate results to see what we can change in the way the back-end systems are working in order to reduce the overheads and the costs and improve the responsiveness. It was really, really good at doing that level analysis of what AWS was doing, because the AWS information bucket for ChatGPT is enormous. There's so much stuff in there, and you can really see what it's doing. So, yeah, That's a good use case. Like, we know how to do that, but it sucks. So we just got the bot to do it for us. It took 8 seconds instead of the half day it usually takes, with a mistake or two. So, because you don't want to get that one wrong by an order of magnitude in any direction. Yes, Rich? Yes. I don't know. I don't do that. But it's good to know if everybody needs that. A cover letter? Yep. Excellent. I think I know my own job title. Documentation, yeah. Code level documentation's cool. So if you plug code into it and get documentation back for the code, and API documentation is really cool. It's very thorough. It's really good. Breaks everything down and sends it back. And it's easy. And that's just one of those mundane, tedious jobs that everyone knows how to do that everybody hates, which is why it never exists most of the time unless you love documentation. Yeah, you got to do it in a closed loop. Yeah, it depends on whether or not you want to do that. But if you have, say, an open API endpoint that's publicly accessible and you send it the API and you get the API docs back from it, that's kind of cool. It's useful. It's just like, how far do you want to go with it? A friend in Australia is doing engineering reports. So on bridge construction, he has all this data about bridges, and he has these template things for the type of report that he needs to do, but he has the data protected, but the template report can access that data, analyze it locally on the fly, not send it anywhere, and then bring it back out, and that's really cool too. So there are so many different use cases, and like data modeling and analysis is huge, as is documentation of boring APIs. Anyway, I'm 2 minutes before the end. Thank you all for your patience and listening and my pointless rambles and shitty slides. It's good to be back, and we'll see you around during the week.
Thank you.